So you see, Bruce Small started in a very small way in a tiny little shop out in Malvern. That's how he came to call them Malvern Stars, in the suburb of Melbourne. And then he branched out. He did very well.
Yes.
Because now there's not a homemade, there's not all Japanese.
Although the Melbourne Stars are still being produced, I don't know whether the componentry from they may be using Japanese.
Won't be many. He had massive factories. He had a very,
Right.
very big factory in Melbourne,
Yes.
Bruce Small, one in Sydney, and one up in Brisbane.
Right.
Now, Hubert started, he went over to this was his first time to Aussie.
So this was what, 1932, was it?
The Sydney 1000. 21 years there. He was born in 1910.
Right, so it was
31.
31?
Yes.
Right.
And then he stayed on, you see.
Yes.
He got a job with Bruce Small. He was in Sydney for a while and then down to Melbourne. And because there was a very big velodrome down in Melbourne.
Right.
The
Like a board track?
board track.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he used to race there, of course. No, he did that for years, many, many years. But when he first went over and he worked for Bruce Small and raced, joined the clubs, the
Yes.
professional clubs, and raced in all the states, I think, in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane. And then, what else? Then he came home. Oh, he kept coming home.
So I think he stayed over there about, 6 months the first time, did he?
Or
or so?
a year or so.
Oh, a year or so, okay.
Quite a while.
Yes.
I didn't know him then. Then he came back because his father was in business in Greymouth and making a terrible mess of it.
Oh, really?
So
This was what, Turtill Brothers?
Turtill, no,
This was just
Turtill and Son, I think
Turtill
it
and
had end up. I
Okay.
don't know, I've forgotten. And he came home to sort of straighten him out and sort him out. Then he went back again and he worked with Bruce Small from then on, really. Ended up being factory manager in the big Sydney.
Right. Oh, okay. So what year would that have been when Hubert was factory manager?
Oh, I do it when the war broke out.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. So this is the late 30s.
Yes.
39, 40.
Yeah, well, we were married in 38.
Right.
And we went over there and, oh, that's right, we went over to Australia in 38 and went to Melbourne. And there wasn't any work in Melbourne. Oh, things used to go really flat, you know.
This was during the
In the
Depression.
winter, yes.
Oh, okay, for being a cycle.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we came back up to Sydney. Oh, no, that's right, we stayed in Melbourne. He did get work. He went on the outdoor sales, selling cycles. Poor old darling. It was hard work.
Selling cycles, how did he do that?
Outdoor sales, he used to go, they had a big team of them,
Right.
and they'd get contacts. They had their advertisements, and anyone that was interested, they'd take their name, and
Yes.
then they had these salesmen that used to go out and interview people.
Right.
And he did Port Melbourne, which was tough,
Right.
a very poor area, and St Vincent. We lived in St Vincent's Place then. And he was still training and riding on the board tracks. Because he used to do what did they used to call those races? I've forgotten. Individual it was. Match races.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Match
yes.
races.
So head to head.
Yes.
Two riders head to head. Yeah.
Just the two riders.
Yes.
Yes. He did that and he'd get, I think they used to get about £5 if they won.
Right.
Well, he did that every Saturday night for a long, long time.
When
He'd
did,
win some and he'd lose some.
So at that stage in his career, I mean, obviously when he became factory manager for Smalls in 39, 40, around 1940, that would have been a big responsibility in time.
Oh, yes.
So did he continue to train?
Oh, yes, he still trained, but really he's really finished doing most of his racing by then.
Right.
Well, we lived out at DY and he used to pedal in, which was about 3/4 of an hour's trip.
Right.
Come down into Manly and over in the ferry and then down to Broadway, where the factory was. But because he brought teams over here to race up at Otrahonga.
So was that a part of Small's initiative?
No, this was through his professional cycling club.
Right.
And he brought 2 or 3, I think 3 or 4 teams over. 4 of them used to come.
And what was the purpose for that? Was he trying to?
Because it was coming home, and Otrahonga in those days had a chap called Lawrence. Forgotten what his first name was, but he was a great organiser, and he used to. It's only a small place, you know.
I've been through there.
Through there, yes, but you wouldn't remember it. Otrahonga. It's only a tiny place out from Hamilton.
I was wondering because there's some programs from some race meets that Terry
Otrahonga
has got there from Otrahonga. And I was thinking, well, gee, that's
No, well, he used to bring teams over. 4 of them would come.
Right.
And it was such a draw. They'd get 1,500 to 1,000 people, or more than that, perhaps nearly 2,000, in this little town that was never really heard of much. Yeah. For the sports meeting. It was really a wonderful day, usually at Easter time. And because they'd all come to see the Aussies.
Was this purely a cycling event, or did they combine it with other foot races? Or
it was, no, they had everything.
So
have you ever been to an old gala meeting? We used to have them here in Ashburton years ago.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
And they'd have the big track, and they'd have cycling, and they'd have running and hurdling and all the rest of it in the centre.
Yes. Yeah. I see on some of the programs they even would have a boxing match or.
Yes, it's sort of a day's sporting entertainment.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
So they draw a big crowd of people. For
big
those.
Crowd, big crowd, and he did that for about 3 or 4 years, and then after we were married, in what year did we marry? 1938, and I went over. Well, then he didn't have so much time, although we had a lovely time, really. We were in Melbourne for a while, then we went up to Brisbane for 2 years, factory manager up there, and then he came back and took over Sydney, and that was a big job.
Yes, I mean, that would have been
very big.
Ultimate.
Oh, it was. Yes. It was a big job. And then when we were over there right through the war in Australia, and then we came home. What year did we come home? 45, I think.
45. So immediately after the war.
After the war, yes.
Yeah. So I suppose when Hubert took on those jobs, he was nearing 30. So I suppose in those days, from a sporting, as a sprinter as well.
Oh, you're getting a bit old.
Getting a little bit.
Yes, the young ones were coming on.
Yes, yeah.
But he held a lot of records, for his. He was a very good sprinter. But and then we came home, of course. Now we're fiddled about.
So when did the children come into the scene?
Turtill was born in, what were we now, 38, 41.
41, yeah.
And Judith was in 45.
Right.
She's 4 years
so you
younger than him.
Came back with the young baby?
Oh yes, only 6 months old.
6 months old. And whereabouts did you settle when you came back?
Well, we came to Ashburton.
Yes.
Because I had a lot of family here. My mother and father by this time, because my father was in business here.
Right.
He started Smallbone Brothers.
Smallbone Brothers, yeah, which is a big name still.
Still going, yes.
Strong, yeah.
None of the Smallbones in it. But yes, he started it in the garage in 1918.
Right.
1918, It's a long time ago, isn't it?
Again, it would have been a pretty tough time to set up, just after the First World War.
Yes, it was. But we really came back to Ashburton because my grandfather and grandmother lived here, and Granny had an accident, burnt, and she died. And poor grandfather was so devastated.
Right.
And Mum was the only daughter, so we came back. That's what really brought us back here.
Yes.
And then Dad started Smallbone Brothers. was on his own for 2 or 3 years, and then he took his brother in, which is the silliest thing he ever did.
Right.
The brother sort of got dug in there till it finally... Oh, they worked together for about 35 years, I think.
Is that right?
That wasn't too bad. And then they split up. Oh dear. So Uncle Harold's son just lives around the corner. Bruce Smallbone, he still pops round to see me every now and again.
Okay.
And so that's how we came to Ashburton. And then Hubert was born in Ashburton, actually.
Yes, although it's interesting, I noticed in one of the newspaper clippings he was being claimed as a greymouth.
Yes, no, he was born just round here in, used to be Will Street and now it's Phillip Street, in 1910. And then they went over to the coast.
Oh, ouch. Yeah?
Over to the coast when he was about 6. I think he had a year at the borough school.
Oh. Sorry.
I tell people, you know, I started at borough. I did. Started at borough school in 1917. And they look at me.
Yeah.
So they say, how old is she? So I'm one of the oldest ones.
You're just doing so well. I just, you know.
Around.
Gosh. Yeah.
Yes, poor old Dad here, but he, you know, physically he was a very healthy person, but his heart was enlarged.
Right.
And I wonder sometimes that was, I don't suppose it would be excessive exercising, would it? Don't know.
I don't know.
And also he had an enlarged liver, but he had a stroke, that was the sad thing. Always had a high blood pressure.
Had he been on medication for that?
Yeah, for a long time.
Yeah.
I was saying to my doctor the other day, you know, one thing I'm thankful for, I'm not on any medication.
Yeah.
Most people at my age are, aren't they? They've got blood pressure or some jolly
something, I mean, yeah.
And I think perhaps that's why I'm so healthy. You know, I take a sleeping pill, that's all.
You don't let things get on top of you. You don't sort of.
Well, I don't need to now, Ross. But sometimes I used to get into a bit of a. I was never. Hubert was the easygoing one.
Right.
Placid one. I was always a bit
behind
cranky.
The scenes, toiling away, making things happen, keeping the house together.
Yes, and sewing for Judith. I used to sit up and sew till 1 a.m. for her.
So coming to Ashburton, I mean, it's 1945. So what did you?
Came back.
Yes. Yeah.
And then we went. Mum and Dad were living in Geraldine. Then, do you know Geraldine?
Oh yeah.
Pretty big place.
Isn't it gorgeous? Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Up on the hill, up McDonald Street, they lived.
Right.
So when we came back, we stayed with my sister and brother-in-law who farmed out Long Beach.
Right.
And between them and Mum and Dad in Geraldine. And then Hubert actually bought a business in Geraldine and we couldn't get a house.
Oh, okay.
The houses only went to return servicemen.
Right.
They were,
excuse me, I'm
that
sorry.
That little red light flicked.
That's a good sign.
But it's gone off now.
Is it? Oh. Yeah, the battery's getting a little bit low, but we'll just here and there. I'm sorry, it's a bit intrusive, but.
So that was about. Where did we get to?
You couldn't get a house in Geraldine. You went to the RSA.
Oh no! So we Hubert got a job offered to him then in Christchurch.
Christchurch, yeah.
So up he went, and that's how we finally went to Christchurch. Right. But it was a shame because he'd actually bought a business in Geraldine, a cycle business.
Right.
And he was doing so well.
And there's available in Christchurch. I know when we were in Whangarei there was lots of kauri. It's all kauri up there, but not so much kauri down in Christchurch.
No,
so
that's right.
It would have been a beautiful house. So,
it was. It was a lovely two-storied house, a beautiful stair rail.
Yes, balustrade type ornate.
Beautiful, with a big round bit at the bottom.
Yes.
Oh, it was a lovely, and we worked like, we were always doing houses up.
Well, yeah,
Have you done that?
We've done a little bit of gardening type stuff, but not the houses. Well, Hubert was probably better with his hands.
Hubert was excellent.
Yeah, yeah.
We always were, the both of us, do-it-yourself type.
Right.
And we painted and we altered and we chopped pieces out of houses.
Yeah.
I'll never forget one night, we started about 10 at night, we decided we were from this great big dining room, you had to come out into the hall to go to the kitchen. We'll put a door through there. Yeah. We started at some unearthly hour in the night. What the neighbours thought was going on, I wouldn't know.
Bang crash.
Saw. Oh dear.
So when you woke up in the morning and looked at your handiwork, did you think...
Poor kids wondered what it was. We thought we'd gone berserk, I think.
So how old would the children have been at this sort of...
Oh, Jude, well, let me think. Then, that's right, we couldn't get a house. And then Hubert, it's gone strange, but he got the offer of a job in Christchurch, so he put the business on the market, right. And he went up and still couldn't get a house. So I stayed with Mum and Dad for a while, and then he got this beautiful house at Walker Street.
Yes. And
we bought that, and then I went up, and the children started at St Michael's School.
Oh, okay.
Turtill did. Judith wasn't old enough.
Right, so that's just down the road from Walker Street?
Yeah, just down the road. Yeah. And then Hubert came up, finally got rid of the shop. We were always doing everything back to front, and a house in one town and a business in the other.
Well, it must have been quite difficult.
Oh, it was.
The war.
It was. And he used to come up at weekends, and the poor old fellow, Daddy had this motorbike. Oh, he used to be worried silly that he'd make it. And then it got in the winter time, it went on for about 9 months, I suppose, and then he finally sold the business and came up to Christchurch and worked for Bruce Butler Cycles.
Okay, yes, there's a name.
Yes. Butler Cycles.
Right.
He worked for them.
Gosh.
So, and then he finally, he was good with men, and he got a job with in charge of the finishing shop at Bunting's, if anywhere else. That was the big brush people.
Yeah, right.
So he had a bit of variation. But he bought all that bike stuff, do you remember it?
Oh, yes.
Now, where was it when you... Oh, out in the shed.
Out in the shed. I remember he was telling me he had enough frames there to make, or enough tubing to make about 500 bicycles.
Do you know what he did? He never got at it. Right. By the time Turtill finished his car, and then Turtill was killed. Yeah. He was... that was in 1971 or two, I think it was.
By which time Hubert was...
29, yes.
So Hubert's in his early 60s, and it's probably...
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
And we really had in touch, because I was working, we really had... That's right, because the 60th birthday we had a party, and for mine, and... for Dad's, though, he was May. And we decided we'd finish work that year. Yeah. And Turtill was doing well, and Jude, she was... No, she wasn't married then. She was working for... an office in Christchurch. Forgotten who it was. Forgotten. And we thought now we'd retire and he could get his bikes built.
Yes.
But after the war, almost immediately, who came in with all these ready-built bikes?
Right.
The Japanese.
Mm.
It flooded the market.
Right.
Well, that stuff stayed there. Remember that?
So
good tubing.
Good tubing. So the Japanese flooded the market with, cheap, shall we say?
Yes. He could have made a living perhaps doing specials and racing bikes.
Yes, yeah.
But because he was Turtill with this, he got the kink on building this massive car of his.
Right.
Oh, it was a fantastic car.
So what happened to the car after all that?
It was terrible. And of course, here's all this stuff up in the roof. Yeah. And then when Turtill was killed, we'd already given him Caddy, the Cadillac, when he got his university entrance, and he was 29 when he was killed. And he and his friend Gary Mulholland had just finished the car, building this massive Continental, it's called. I wonder if you'd never seen it in Christchurch.
No, I don't recall it, but tell me a little bit more about it.
I must have a look and get a photo of it. Anyway, after Turtill died, of course, here it sat in the garage, keep filling up the garage. And so we still had 3 cars.
So that's pretty sad for you, isn't it?
It was. Yeah. Broke both our hearts.
I know, I sort of remember when we, had our chats out at the conservatory, that just, struck me as...
Oh, Turtill had passed, he'd been killed then, had he?
Oh, absolutely.
Had he? Not long.
Well, I mean, this was in the mid-80s, and I suppose it was pretty recent.
Oh, yes.
It just sounded so
it was devastating. Yeah. Well, then, to sort of overcome the disaster and the sorrow, we both stayed on work for another 5 years.
Right.
And then we gave up. And in the meantime, we'd bought a cottage over at Moana, Lake Brana.
Yes.
Had we had that when you were...
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And that was our lifesaver. Yeah. We used to tear over there, and we were building bits on. We had carpenters there, and it was wonderful, really. It filled in that... that really quite desperate part of our lives. Yeah. So, but because poor old Hubert still had all stuff up in the garage and Turtill's car, so finally he sold Turtill's car to the Continental, which really is quite magnificent, to a friend of ours, what's his name, William Datland. A very old family friend. He's got the garage up here now, and he had it for years, and did quite a few improvements to it, and he's finally sold it. But he also bought our caddy for next to nothing. He just about gave it away.
What year was the Cadillac?
1922.
Wow.
It's a magnificent machine. Yeah. But it's so, as Hubert always, he was very fond of William. The part of our family, really. Our grandfathers came from... William's mum and I were like sisters, and our grandfathers came out from Ireland together. They were school friends, so that's how far back it went. Right. So William, and he was very, very good and very keen on cars and mechanics. So he sold it to him. So he's still got it.
Okay.
And he's got 2 boys and a girl now, and they go on all these rallies and they have a wonderful time. Yeah. So it's, dear old caddy's still there, still the same paint as Hubert and I put on it.
And when did you buy the car?
Oh, we bought it just after we came back from Australia. Right. That was our only family car for years. This massive, great big, and we had a caravan. People used to look at us, sort of, you'd go past and they'd be wondering how much more was coming behind.
So it was
a big old-fashioned caravan, trust us.
And a big Cadillac.
Oh, a beautiful old car. Yeah, beautiful car.
So would it be fair to say, like with the work that Hubert had in Australia, you're coming back, you were, I say wealthy. I mean, he'd made good money from the bike racing, perhaps. And
yes.
So he'd set himself up well, is what I'm perhaps trying to
say. Yes. We bought flats and we had shops out at High, and
that's right, Waikoloa, wasn't it?
Waikoloa.
That's right. I think that's how I sort of came into
the picture
as well.
There was always something going wrong. I wouldn't advise anybody. My daughter's got 2 flats. I gave her the money for one in. Where do they live? The Blue Mountains. Katoomba.
Oh, okay.
And she said today she's thinking about selling them. Would I be agreeable? And I said, well, it certainly hasn't earned me anything. I put 45,000 into it, but I've never got a penny back.
Is it right?
So I said, you might as well sell them.
Yeah. Oh, well, it was nice of her to ask, I suppose. I mean, but in those days, with you doing houses up and selling, that sort of thing.
Oh, yes.
Was that common in those days, or were you?
Yes, a lot of people did.
Yeah.
And then we got a chance to go out to New Brighton Road.
Right.
Only the thing that attracted Hubert to that was this massive 1,000-foot garage.
Yes.
Because he was going to do all this building and never got it done. So life wanders on, and oh dear, that's what I said to the doctor. I think now the things I should have done. He said, don't think about that, enjoy what you have.
Well, I mean, we've just scratched the surface here, and it sounds to me as if you and Hubert did a tremendous amount in...
Oh, we were workers.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Always doing something, trying to get a bit ahead.
Yeah.
But...
good for you. Yeah. I'm interested, how did you come to meet?
Yes, Hubert's... It's rather strange. My sister was married to a farmer, and he, Sess Kennedy, he was over in Greymouth, started a bus run, or what he called it, business. And it went bung, so he came back and went farming, and Doss met him. She was a nurse at the hospital. And then she rings up, and they got married, and she was in 36, and she rings up one day and she says, oh, we're going to a dance tonight down at the Radiant Hall, and I want you to come to be, because I had a boyfriend, to be a partner for a friend of Hubert's. And I said, oh, I don't know, I'd have to ask Bobby. Oh, blow Bobby, she said. Right. You come with me. Here it was Hubert. And we got along so well together. He was such a good-natured thing.
Yes.
He was a lovely person, lovely-natured man.
How would you describe him? I mean, what when you think back now?
Well,
he had a nice, easygoing disposition.
Oh, kind, and yes, he was. He was a darling, very affectionate, very... everybody liked him, always smiling.
When he got on his bike, though...
he was a bit of a tiger then.
He must have been a pretty competitive sort of guy.
He was. He was very competitive.
And obviously, I mean, I'm not saying he wasn't a fair rider, but just he obviously had the urge to win.
Oh, yes, yes.
And it must have been pretty cut and thrust sort of on the... I remember reading one article about how Hubert actually took a fall and...
Oh, yes. Oh, they were tough.
Yes.
And there was
some
one
pretty
fellow...
hard doers.
Oh, yes. And they had a big meetings every week. I used to go out to the board track with him. And there was one chap, I've forgotten his name. It's not terrible. I don't think I'd ever forget. And he was a long distance. They used to have a 5-miler at the end of the meeting. And every night he'd win that. And that was sort of, I think they got £5, which was a week's wages in those days.
Right, so good money.
Yes.
Yeah.
And every time, I wish I could remember his name, he'd sit there and he'd pedal around. You'd have to have someone to lead you out.
Right.
Perhaps Hubert would lead him out, someone would lead him out.
Yeah.
And then they'd get a cut, perhaps 10 shillings.
Well,
what do you think of the money they get today?
Yeah.
Oh dear. So this used to go on. But he really, this fellow, what's his name? I've forgotten. I can see
it'll come back.
It will. Yeah. He, that was really more or less his living, you know.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, that was his week's pay. Because Hubert worked, they only got £4.10 a week, I think, or £4.10.
So,
you know,
so having worked all week, the chance to double that with a race,
that's right.
I mean, it's
so it was
good
quite,
money.
yes, it was quite good money.
So in today's money, maybe $500,000 sort of.
Yes, that's right, but you can't compare it to now, can you?
No.
But no, he was very good. He raced for quite a few years.
So if he went to Australia in we sort of thought 31.
Yes, when he was 21.
Right.
31.
So then you actually met him at the dance. Would have been was after he'd come back from Australia.
Yes,
the
I
first
do
time?
know, about 37.
Right.
Oh no, I met him before that, I think. I've forgotten. No, Doss was married. She got married in 36. Must have been 36.
Right.
And then we got married in 38.
And he was obviously
still over
his career as a bike rider. He was
doing very well.
So, what did people think of that as a sport and a profession? I guess as a professional rider. I mean,
they was frowned on for profession.
Yeah, well, I mean,
in those days, you had to be an amateur to be any good.
Right.
No credit to professionals.
So he was not an outcast, but, well, I mean...
well, in the amateur, he couldn't race with amateurs. Yeah. But that's why Australia was better, because there was a big professional circuit there.
And how did the public perceive these men? Were they...
Oh, they were heroes.
They were heroes, yeah.
They loved them, yes. They all had their favourites, and was always in the big sports. Well, I think there'd be some of them in those, wouldn't there?
Yes.
Write-ups.
Yes.
In the papers, about their each week. And, they used to bet on them, of course.
So that was a big part of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, dear.
But that's how they generated the money to pay for the purses. So,
yes, that's right, that's right. But, no.
And they went over to England in 1935.
36.
36, sorry.
Was it 35 or 36?
This is what Hubert Opperman, and
yes,
Hubert was invited as part of that team. That must have been a tremendous thing.
And then he raced in Germany. Oh, yes, he was first, I think. Now, what do you think about this? Yes. Who was it that won the... Hitler was just started.
Right.
And this is while he was in England, and they had big sports meetings. They had the big board tracks on the continent.
Yeah.
And he was invited to go over to Berlin.
Right.
And he one of the first big sports meetings they had, and old Hitler was there.
Right.
And every athlete that came in was a pile of Mills bombs.
Yes.
And every athlete that came in had to throw so many of those as they came in.
Why?
For practice.
Oh, okay. So they were already starting
they
to
were
think
just
about...
dummies, of course.
Yeah.
He was working on them then. Wasn't he Australian? Wasn't he? Oh, fantastic man, though. To put a country... massive country like that under your thumb.
It's almost like mass hypnosis or something. Everyone just following on behind. I've got a video on the Berlin Olympics, 1936.
Have you?
And
now let's think who won that.
It's more on the track and field and athletics side of things.
Was that when it wasn't Snell, was it? Oh no.
No, you're thinking of Lovelock, are you?
Or... Oh, Lovelock.
Yeah.
He was at Timaru Boys High when I was at Girls High.
Oh, okay.
I used to see him at the dances. I was a bit younger than him. It was sad, wasn't it?
Yeah, it seemed. I mean,
I wonder what happened.
I'm quite sure. Yeah, exactly. I mean, he hadn't been well though, had he?
No, he was a doctor.
Yes.
Yes. And they were living in America, weren't they?
That's right.
And she was in the home, I think. She just had a child.
That's right.
And whether he fell or whether he took his own life, I don't know. It was tragic.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we thought it was marvellous when we went to the school dances in Timaru.
Right.
I boarded down there at Girls High. And Jack was our hero.
Yeah.
And, well, I think it was just about that time that Hubert went to Berlin to this big sports meeting. And, I forget how many times, a very small track.
Yes. Which he wouldn't have liked very much. Wouldn't have liked the tight track.
Oh, well, he wasn't used to it.
He wasn't used to those, no.
And he had to partner someone in a team for Britain.
Right.
Sid Cousins or one of those, in this big tournament they had. And then he was supposed to go to the World Championships, and Bruce Small didn't post his entry away.
Oh, okay.
That was rather pleasant, wasn't it?
Gosh.
But
so between not being eligible for the Olympics and missing out on having
Oh dear.
So
but he was very good at the building, at the trade, and BSA wanted him to stay. He went and designed, I think it was a tandem, and I think it was a track bike for them. when he went in 1936, and they wanted him to stay in England. They were calling, when he went back by boat, there were a lot of these old tradesmen that had come out to the colonies,
yes,
were called back to England, you know, to build arms to get the factories going again.
Yeah.
And they wanted Hubert to stay, but he didn't. He came back home.
Because if he'd got tied up with BSA, Hubert might have become involved in that as well. I mean,
he would have.
Because that was the origin of BSA, wasn't it?
Yes. Oh, he definitely would have.
Yeah.
Because he was very clever at those sort of things, very intelligent person.
Very practical.
Very practical, yes.
Yeah.
So there we are. So life wandered on. But I must tell you this, you know, he was so ill because he had this very high blood pressure.
Right.
And he had to have a pacemaker. We went over to Australia once for a holiday and he wasn't well. And our silly old doctor gave him extra, he was swelling. I'll never forget, about 2 days before we left, and he woke me up. Oh, I said, I feel terrible. His legs were swollen, so I rushed him away down to the doctor, and he gave him some extra fluid pills, mind you.
Right.
So over we go to Aussie, and Jude was in a musical, and we stayed a couple of days in Sydney, and then we went up to their house at the Blue Mountains, and he was so ill, you know, and we went tramping around the town, the poor old fellow, how he ever kept up with us. And we got up to the Blue Mountains and Judy said, I'm going to take him to our doctor. She said he looks so ill. So she rang Rodney, her doctor, and we went down and, he said, you are in heart failure. He said, he gave him some tablets, said, you go home, he says, and don't do a thing. Don't even lift anything. Here he'd been working around the house helping Terry. He said, and if anything happens, give me a call immediately.
Yeah.
He said, you'll have to have a pacemaker.
Oh, okay.
So luckily he knew specialists, so he got him in. And he went down to Sydney Royal Hospital over the bridge there and had a pacemaker fitted.
Right.
And they said, that'll give you 4 years. And it gave him just 4.
Gosh.
Just 4 years. So whether it was damage from overstress, exercise, I don't know what it was caused by, but that was a bit of a blow, but never mind, he got 4 years, poor old pet.
Yeah, I mean, it's quality of life as well, isn't it? I mean, you know, the 4 years was he...
He was very lucky only to have had a year of sickness, you know, of not to be not able to look after. Well, he could look after himself. He could do. Look at the grin. But you can see there, he doesn't look quite right.
Oh, no, it looks pretty
good.
pale and hard.
Yeah.
But you would know. You would recognise.
Yeah, he couldn't. Speak. He couldn't speak much. Well, he jabbered away, but you couldn't understand what he was saying. Poor old pet. No. So it was very fortunate because I had a friend and her husband. Oh, she nursed him for about 4 or 5 years,
yeah.
And he was in a wheelchair. And then he went to the hospital over here for about 3. But I must tell you about Hubert and getting rid of that stuff in that garage. Oh, Ross. It was a nightmare, what with him and Terry.
Yeah.
I really could have shot the two of them. We had a certain time. We sold it to an insurance company. No.
Oil company.
Petrol place.
Yep.
Oil company. They
Yep.
were going to put a big garage
I remember you
there.
saying.
Yes, big oil company. And we were regretting then that we'd sold.
I know they were putting pressure on the residents. They were wanting to redevelop that corner,
yes.
weren't
And Dick next door wouldn't sell.
That's right. Yes.
So, but we'd already got our money and sold it. We signed up, and then after we signed up, we rang up our solicitor and said, can we change our mind? No, he said, you can't.
Right.
I suppose it's the best thing we ever did, really. To get down here, it's much easier living.
Yeah.
I'd drive perhaps around Brighton, but I don't think I'd be able to. Oh, I suppose. Judy won't let me drive to Christchurch now, and she's silly because I can.
Oh, well, I better keep out of that one, hadn't I?
She thinks I'm too old. So I get a driver when I've got to go to Christchurch to the eye specialist and that. And I've got friends too that take me. So now, what was I going to tell you? Oh, about this stuff.
Okay.
You know, when you saw it, getting that shed emptied.
Yeah.
See, the big trouble was they gave us 2 years to get out.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And of course we kept carting stuff over to Moana.
Yeah.
You should have seen poor old Moana. The garage there was packed full. What he thought he was going to do with it, Ross, I'll never know.
Do some work in Moana?
He never realised that he was getting too old for it.
Yeah.
And do you know, we had, instead of having I don't suppose you could have got an auction, Terry came and he would cart stuff home to his place.
Yep. And
And I'd load up a trailer with all the stuff to take to the dump. He'd come and he'd take half of it off. Well, this went on for weeks and weeks till I nearly went cranky. And then I said, there was all that tubing, and I said to Hubert, well, you'll have to sell it. So he rang one of the tubing firms up, and they came out and they offered him a price for it. Oh, but it's that beautiful chrome manilium or whatever it was, some special sort of tubing. And I said, well, you'll just have to take what they give you.
Yes.
So anyway, do you know, he dragged it all down from the roof, all that stuff, and him with that bad heart, and he put it on remember the high fence, and he sandpapered all the rust off it.
Really? What a huge job.
Night after night after night he was standing out there till 7:30 and 8 at night.
And this was so that he could
And
get
that he thought he'd get a better price.
for it.
And then they were to come one Saturday morning for this tubing. Oh, I'm not going to let them take it, he said. They can't have that chrome stuff, he said, it's too valuable.
Right.
I said, Hubert, we've got to get rid of it.
Yep.
So out to the garage I go with him, and I said to the chap, Hubert was going to tip some of it.
Yep.
I said, put it all on the truck,
Right.
please, and get it away. And the poor old fellow, he looked at me, stunned. And here he said he didn't get another cent more for it.
No. But you had to put your foot down.
Oh, I had to take charge. And then he had all that other stuff. Oh, I'll ring up Melbourne and see if they'd buy it. I said, how do you think we're going to get it packed and over to Melbourne? Because we had only about 3 weeks then to get out.
Right.
And, oh, well, he did this. So anyway, I rang the scrap metal guy. He came and took the lot. Poor old Dad.
Were you,
I think
were you in the bad books for a
Oh,
while?
I'm sure I was for a long time.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. It was a nightmare. And I really think perhaps that brought his end closer. Although it had to be done, didn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, having the things in the shed, was that, I mean, whilst those things were there, the possibilities were there,
He still
the
hoped.
hope. Exactly.
Still hoped.
Yeah.
And of course then when the clean-up came and all Turtill stuff,
Yes.
well, I'd go out and he'd be sitting there weeping. Just weeping. Day after day after day, you know.
Yeah.
It was awful. But we had to get out of it. So here we are. I just wish he'd had about 4 or 5 years here. Because he loved it.
Yes.
And it was close to, well, we used to cut through the Linders Pass to around Lake Linden to the coast.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
And we had great ideas of going and staying for, say 6 weeks or a couple of months over there. We never made it.
No.
I think we only had 3 trips over there after we came here.
So you'd sell Moana?
Yes,
And,
we got 60,000 for that, so that wasn't too bad.
Well, it seems like the place has really taken off. I mean, it's a
you
beautiful place. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
See
our
what the
funny
attraction-
little house is still there.
Is it?
Hubert wanted to build a 2-storey on top of it, but was so pathetically built, but I don't think it would have held another story. But yes, there's massive homes gone up. Have you seen it lately?
I haven't been over there lately, so yeah.
It's absolutely gone bananas.
Right.
They're paying
Yeah.
50 and 60,000 for sections.
Right.
So if we bought a bit of land there, we'd have been all right.
So you had to get rid of what had been stashed away in Moana as well.
Had to get a friend of ours, Keith Klemple. He took over the garage.
Right.
We had a couple of garage sales, and then Hubert, I'd actually signed up, Roger Flesher was our solicitor, and I'd actually got a good offer for it.
Yeah.
Just about 3 days, well, when Hubert went over to the hospital, and I said to Roger, "What do you think?" And he said, "Look, you'll have to take charge.
Right.
You can't. He's past it." So just about a week before he died, it was signed up and sold.
Yeah.
And then I had to get William Datland, that's got the cars.
Yeah.
Him and his mum and wife took me over, and we sorted it out and cleaned it up. It was sad parting with it. We had for 29 years, we had it.
So the end of an era.
The end of an era.
Yeah.
The other day I got a telephone call, and this man said, I haven't seen you for a long time, I wonder how good your memory is. I'm Don Hayward. My brain went tickety-tock. And he said, from Moana, we used to be at Moana. Oh, I said, I know, because we used to visit and had lovely times. One time we'd go over, we'd have dinner at their place, and then they'd come over to us. Right. And so they sold up and left and went to Tasmania, and moved about 5 times. Where do you think they are now? Pleasant Point.
Oh, okay.
That amused me, Pleasant
Coming home.
Coming home to Pleasant Point. Oh dear.
Well, that is a pleasant place, though, isn't it?
It's a pretty wee place.
Nice place to put your feet.
So he was going to come up, but I haven't seen him yet.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, if he's made contact, no doubt he'll make
again.
One. Yeah.
Yes. So that was nice. And the other folk that we had a lot to do with was John and Tottie McDonald. That they have a farm out to Leaston.
Right. I don't know.
Heard of them? No. He's a Cadillac man.
Oh, okay.
Oh, he's got a lot of ancient Cadillacs. Well, ours was in 19, what?
22?
22.
Yeah.
Well, he's got older than that, the old...
Yes, they went back to sort of 1900,
yes,
whatever, 2
way back.
Sort of thing, yeah.
So we met them through the Cadillac Club, and we were great friends. We had some lovely times. He had a Land Rover, and they used to come over to the coast, and we used to have great times with them. And they popped in not long ago.
Oh, okay.
It was quite nice.
Oh, lovely.
Yes.
So you toured around quite a bit with the caddy, did you? Or?
Oh, yes, we had it for a long time,
yes,
of course.
Yeah.
Our family car and then Turtill, of course, just loved it.
Right.
He was very mechanically inclined, and he would never have parted with it, never. But so William was our next best shot, because I don't think he ever will either.
No. And maybe it'll stay in the family or...
Yes, it still sits up there. Well, he goes out in a lot. He's always popping in every now and again. He'll come up to drive and caddy for me to see.
Oh, isn't it?
So it's not like parting with it for good, is it?
No, I mean, it's in good hands.
Yes, that's right.
I was just interested, one of the bikes that Terry Kizanowski's got, the blue one I mentioned, I think it's the last bike that Hubert
It was his racing bike, yes.
It was a blue, sort of a sky blue one, beautiful bike.
Yes.
Wait, what was the story? How did that come about? I think it's about 1953 or something like that. So
it is one he built for himself, was it?
Well, I guess at that stage, like, Hubert was 43,
53.
So unless he was just doing it for...
I think he did. He built quite a lot of racing bikes.
Yes, yeah.
At Walker Street, when we lived at Walker Street. Did them out in the garage.
So this was like a hobby, because, I mean, he's working at, Butler's? Still at that stage during the day, and still that interested in bikes, that he was building them.
Yes, loved building.
At home as well.
Yes, he did a lot of racing bikes.
And did he do them
specials?
For specials? They're all under his own name.
Yes.
And
Hubert Turtill on them.
Yeah, beautifully finished. And who was? I mean,
he did. Well, when we went, yes, he did most of the enamelling. Mm-hmm.
And some big riders, or who would have ridden them in those days, or did he used to go and watch them compete on them?
Yes, and.
These are track bikes, were they?
Track bikes, yes. Yeah, all specials.
Yes.
Don't know that we went that often.
No, I mean, you're obviously very busy, family,
Yes,
and
there was always
work
something
commitments.
going on.
Yeah. So it was a very busy time.
Oh, it was
And
busy,
happy,
yes. Yeah, we were
time.
always working and happy, always striving away, but trying to get ahead. Oh, and then when we came back from Aussie, though, Jude was only 6 months old, and he got a kink in his head. Do you know the racing bikes? They had the silk tyres.
Yes, the sewn-ups.
Yes.
Sew-ups, yeah.
Well, he was going to make those.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've got no idea. He had this. Do you remember the big long wooden thing that he had there, with all wood, made of wood?
No, I don't recall.
Circle.
Okay. I don't recall.
Don't you recall that?
No.
Well, it sat there and sat there and sat there. He made it, and to roll the fabric on.
Yes.
It was the same size as a bike wheel tyre.
Yeah.
And he tried, he did work hard on those, but because we didn't have the finance. I was working, but it wasn't enough to keep the house going. And, because, you know, it was all amateur, you know, he was only really, what would you call it, not practising, but it was in the dark, you know. He was
just feeling his way as he went.
Yes.
Just that practical sort of
urge that he had, that
yes.
he was sure he could build them.
Yeah.
And I suppose perhaps he could have, but in the end, of course, and we had this beautiful big old house in Walker Street, and he had the old dining room which we didn't use as a workshop for ages, trying to make silk tyres.
And you trying to keep the house tidy, and he's
I'm out working.
Working, okay, yeah.
And he was, we had to take a job too, of course, and that's when he went to Butler's, and then he come tearing home at night. He'd work all hours of the night trying to get, because you got it's all fabric, fine
yes.
silk fabric.
Yes.
And trying to work out how it was done, and oh dear. And then he had to get someone to make the inner tubes.
Yes.
He made quite a few, but not nearly enough to be commercial. You know, they were making cost too much.
They will be all imported, and
they were handmade.
He saw an opportunity there.
Yes, because they didn't have them in New Zealand then.
Oh, okay, not at all.
No, they were very hard to come by. In Aussie, but Aussies were all brought in from France.
Yes.
And he just got this kink, Ross, in his head that he was going to make them.
Yeah.
He had that inventive, kink in him all his life, but he never just quite made it.
Because, I mean, he could make the rest of the bike, so he sort of,
if I
can make this, then why can't I do the tyres as well?
And because they were very expensive in those days to buy.
And they didn't last that long either, I
suppose.
No.
I can remember in the 6-day races, they'd get such a lot of punches, you know.
Would they be sponsored by a tyre manufacturer, perhaps? Or?
Yes, most of them were. He was always sponsored by Bruce Smalls.
Yes, so Smalls would cover the cost of the... So.
And you'll laugh at this. He'd buy up all the ones that were punctured.
Right.
And he would, and I would sit night after night. You had to. They were all sewn.
Yes.
Undoing them, repairing the patches, and sewing them up again. I had all the sewing to do.
Gosh.
What was the matter with us? Then I say I'm wasting my life.
But
we were both very good with our hands.
Yes.
If we just struck something.
Because
we should have stuck to my trade, dentistry. We'd have been right. I was a dental technician.
Yeah.
And he'd have been good at that, and I would have had to tell him what to do.
Maybe he wouldn't have liked that.
I don't know.
You obviously enjoy going fast. And,
oh, yes. But he, he was that was part of his life.
Yes.
And that's what he always felt that he could master. But, oh, dear, dear, dear.
Well, these tyres operate under huge pressures, don't
yes,
they? I mean,
very tight.
Yeah.
And so they had to be so strong.
Yeah. But they're a big advantage. I mean, in the handling and cornering for if you've got somebody competing with these tyres versus somebody on clinchers. Well,
oh, that's right.
You know, it's a big advantage. So
Yes.
I can see why he would.
Oh, they had to have them on the tracks.
Yeah.
You couldn't wear ordinary tyres.
No,
you couldn't ride ordinary tyres. They just fall off.
Yeah.
But this is another kink. All the kinks we've had.
But this is interesting though. This is.
Then I say to my doctor, I've wasted my life.
No, I don't.
Well, wasted for the fact that we never really made it in a big way. We worked hard but never quite got there.
Is it important though, do you think?
Not really, no. As long as you've got plenty to live on, and who wants to be a millionaire? I do.
Did Hubert keep in contact? Was he a person that did he keep in contact with some of his contemporaries?
Oh yes. He had a big circle of Aussie friends.
Yes, yeah.
I think and New Zealand, of course, all over New Zealand and England. Sid Cousins and all those from, and Scott and France. Rempelberg, he used to come out from France. He was a great friend of Hubert's, Charles Rempelberg.
The champion rider, was
yes, on the continent.
Right.
So Hubert rode, that's when he enjoyed the continent, because he got rides with these excellent men.
Interesting. The book I've got here, which obviously you know this book pretty well, it's well, who actually put this together, by the way?
Hubert.
Oh, okay.
And
it's there's a lot of information there up until the time when they were getting ready to go to England, and there's not really anything in there
afterwards. Well, I'll get this other book.
Have you got a piece of the puzzle there?
Whoops, my knees go a bit queer. Well, this is more of a snack book. It's got quite a bit of. Oh, look how it's bent in the heat. Oh dear. Look at its cover. This is, see, this is, who wrote that? Elizabeth R. Allen.
Look at the little sketches, isn't that cute?
Wasn't that cute? Oh, this was Tyrrell's first birthday.
On his first birthday?
Look.
And who's this? Elizabeth R. Allen.
Allen, Inky Allen we used to call her. Oh, fancy that.
A year ago you were quite new, a baby boy with eyes of blue. Now you're one and nearly walking, and soon enough you will be talking. Lots of things you'll do and say, and have adventures every day. Oh, that's super.
Isn't that lovely? Dear old Inky Allen is in there. Those were people, they were became great friends of us up in Sydney, Northbridge, when we lived up there. I've forgotten about poor old Inky. I suppose she's long since gone. Oh, this is all the
What have you got there? Sporting
Here's old Oppie.
Now Hubert Opperman was he was obviously
he was a road rider.
A road rider, long distance man,
no good
world
on
record
track.
holder.
No.
So quite the opposite to Hubert in terms of the riding, but
they were great friends.
Great friends.
Yes.
There's a letter in what Terry's got there from Hubert Opperman on learning of Hubert's passing, and it seems that he was.
They were bosom friends.
Good
very good friends. And Hubert went with the team, the Oppie's team, over with Bruce Small, of course.
To England.
To England,
right.
That's when he went. But you can take those if you like. I don't want them. What's this? Is important.
Amazing. This is about.
Those are Northern Star. Don't know what that's about. That's not here, but West Australian Girl Rides Week Road Record. That's up there. There's the fellow that did his race for his week's pay.
I knew it would.
Bill Moritz.
Bill Moritz. Yeah.
Bill Moritz.
Billy Guyatt.
And Billy Guyatt was a great rider too. He and Hubert had a lot of. But if you'd like those, Ross.
It's up to you, Rita. I mean, I just really came around to have a chat and
I don't use them now myself. Got Tyrrell's not here, so Judy's not that interested in it. What's that?
It's in German, I think. It looks like it might. It's what year is that? 1930. Oh, I can't quite make that out.
What that is.
Could be. Oh, it's a funny looking.
Isn't it?
that That's 35 there.
35. Oh, it must have been. Oh, it might be 35 that he went to England.
That does sort of ring. That does sort of ring a bell.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be probably his licence to ride over there or something.
Okay. See, Hubert Opperman apparently has written a book, and I'm trying to track it down. It'll be quite hard to get hold of a copy over here, but I would have no doubt that Hubert would be mentioned in the book.
Oh, sure to be.
Yes. So I'm really looking forward to
trying to get hold of it.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to a chap on the phone to Australia last night, and he's got a copy, but it's about $100 Australian. So.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I'll have to get Jude to have a look and see if she can get you one.
Well, he's going to look through it and see what mention is made of Hubert in there. So that's quite exciting.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's
Hubert Opperman.
Last week, Hubert Opperman left Melbourne to compete in a series of cycling carnivals and a lecture tour of the northern states. Apparently, he was quite a man of letters.
Yes. He we knew he and his wife very well. His wife, I think, was a New Zealander.
Oh, there's Charles Rampelberg mentioned there. He will be accompanied by the champion sprinter Lenny Rogers of Sydney.
Oh, yes, Lenny was a good rider.
As well as the Continentals, Gino
Bambasciotti. Yes, I knew old Gino.
Yes.
And I knew Charles Rampelberg well.
How did you get to know them?
Well, they were,
Hubert
was racing with them then.
Yeah. So they came down under?
Yes.
Very small would have organised that.
Yes.
Because I know there was another, French rider, Gibaud, was it?
Don't remember him,
no.
But I remember Charles well. His wife came out too. They were out in Australia for quite a while. Ooh, doesn't it smell stale?
I can't...
Can't you smell?
No.
See, there's all this stuff if you'd like to take it with you and have a search through. Look, that's Lenny Rogers.
Oh, okay. So this is a 6-day race.
Yes, is Hubert in that one? No. One he must have gone to. Oh, there's Rampelberg.
Okay, so he's not mentioned on the cover, but doesn't mean maybe he was...
Oh, no, I don't. I think he'd given up by then.
Oh, what year is this? December 1941.
41, so he'd have stopped. He wasn't riding then. But you're very welcome to have it, take them and look over there. Who's that?
Who is it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, as one great writer sees them. So this is more like an editorial type thing. That's Henry Porter that's written that. George Thatcher.
So these were the ones, Speedwell, that was another cycle firm,
right.
Opposition to Bruce Smalls. Oh, and those Knock and Kirby, I know them. They've three.
Charles Rampelberg there.
See, this is after Hubert had retired.
Oh, terrific. Rules governing 6-day.
Bike riding, yes. But there'll probably be a thing in here somewhere about...
What did you think of the 6-day rides? I mean, it must have knocked them around a lot.
Oh, it was hard.
It's almost barbaric, wouldn't you?
I'll keep these silly old letters. You won't want them.
Oh, no. I mean, anything personal like that,
I don't know who that's from. Doesn't it smell terrible? Arthur Wyndham there, he was another very good bike rider.
Can see there.
But see, I've got no one. Jude's not interested and Cyril's gone, so
well, I think,
there's no one to... There's the Odroma Sports thing.
Okay.
So you'll enjoy... There's the cup.
Yeah, I've seen this cup.
Yes, there's him on one of his... going for his life. Has he got the photo of this?
Terry has got...
Oh, that's that one.
A photo...
You're welcome to it if you like it.
Are you sure?
I don't know. I don't want to see
it. Rita, that's
well, I would like someone like you to have it because otherwise Jude will just come along when I go and throw the whole lot out.
Well, I'll tell you another thing. There's a chap that I know that runs a bike shop in Christchurch, and he's very keen on the historical side of things.
Oh, is he?
And he wants to set up one corner of the shop as like a wee museum.
Oh, that'd be lovely.
And he's interested in anything like this.
Yes.
It's all part of this.